Welcome to the Impact Sus podcast. Today's episode is fire as I'm sitting down with a true icon who shaped UK culture and business for decades, Roger Wade. From overcoming adversity to pioneering the UK streetwear scene with his iconic brand BoxFresh, Roger didn't stop there. BoxPark? Yep, you heard it, he built it. And now Roger is channeling his decades of expertise into BoxFund, investing in consumer brands that truly make a difference. In this must-watch chat, we unlock the power of purpose and why constantly examining your why is key to longevity. Profit is vital, but your mission is what outlives trends. We also talked about investors versus allies and why partners who believe in your cause and focus on fewer, deeper bets beat traditional private equity. It's about alignment, not just cash. We also touched on the human edge in an AI world. Yes, tech is exploding and we can see how that positively shapes consumer choices. Taking, for example, the area of health tech and food choices. But EQ, gut instinct, and customer connection are irreplaceable. Roger's insights restored my faith that impact doesn't have to take a back seat, no matter the political noise. Consumers are waking up. They're demanding transparency and they're voting with their wallets. So if you're ready to learn from a rebel turned visionary, let's get into it.
And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Got loads to talk about, and I know we've only got an hour, so I'm going to dive straight in.
Can I just get my drink? Just give me 1
Yes,
minute.
please do.
Okay,
Get your
hold
drink
on.
and get settled
So I'm not.
down.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. So tell me about you, Seema, while I'm getting sorted out. Tell
Oh,
me about
about
the
me.
podcast.
I'm
Tell me
a
about the
I'm a lawyer for
podcast.
my sins,
Oh,
as you
well
know.
done.
But the podcast, you know what? It's been a really quiet year, and I've always just felt more passionate about getting these guys coming and see me and talking about setting up a fund which has got purpose behind it. And I just thought, you know what? Instead of sitting around just twiddling my thumbs, I'm just going to do something that I really, really love. And I like kind of, I don't mind being on camera. I'd say I like it. I don't mind. I think so many people, you talk to in isolation and you just think, there's an opportunity to get your message out there, and not many people might hear it to begin with, but if we just keep going, you never know who might hear it, who might be interested, where you can find synergies. But the most thing I want to do is I want to try and just make the law a bit more accessible. So I'm running a little
Okay.
legal series. So the main thing for me is that I get the same questions over and over again. And I
Yeah.
don't think people, especially venture capital startups, where they're just so limited on budget, it just I just don't think they should have to pay an arm and a leg for that. And no, I can be so much more effective as a strategic advisor. And
Here we go.
where is home, by the way?
Oh, that's not an easy question for me. So I live in London sort of during the week. So
Mm,
I've got a muse house. That's where I am today in Marylebone.
nice.
And but I live in the Sussex countryside, sort of at weekends. So I'm down. I don't work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday religiously.
Mm,
So I
that's
just
good.
I just come. Yeah, I just it's because if not, I'll just get a bit. Have a tendency to just get my work takes over. So I have to literally say to myself, look, Roger, you work those 3 days. Whatever you need to do, you have to do it in 3 days. So I literally come to London on a Monday night and I stay up here till Thursday night and go home. And I generally, people ask me what I do. I just work in London, which is terrible. I should do a bit more. Right? I work. I don't mind it. It's good.
Yeah, why not though? But if you're being really productive and you bash it all out in 3 days, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. I tend, it forces you to be productive because you've got to delegate more because you've got to realize that you can't do everything. So yeah, if anything, I'm more productive because we just have a weekly meet with the team. We all meet in the Muse house on a Tuesday. So it's a bit of a
Nice.
madhouse here on a Tuesday. And then that's it. We all get on with our stuff and yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's
good. It's
that's us.
yeah. How big is the team?
Not big. So directly there is 5 of us, including
Mm.
myself, if I had to think, and indirectly there's sort of maybe 7 or 8 of us. So, but there's myself, my investment director that runs it. We've got our analysts, we've got our EA, we've got our marketing. So that's the 5, and then we've got people that help us with like podcasts. We've
Yeah.
got some investor relations people out there. So about, yeah, 5 core, maybe 8 with add-ons.
Okay. It's trimline, but like effective.
A lot less than I had at BoxPark. I had 1,000 employees. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
but that was like completely different, wasn't it? Like, yeah, it's a different
yeah,
outfit. And I'm not going to talk to you
bigger
too much
business.
about BoxPark, actually. I do want to
Yeah,
get
because you're going to
into
spoil it.
the whole idea behind this ethical consumerism and the
Yeah.
sensories behind it, etc. I want to talk about that in a minute, but
Okay.
just out of interest, I did do my research on Roger Wade, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, I want to know, I know this sounds like a bit of a cheeky question, but
Go
why
on.
did why do you think you got fired from 3 jobs?
Oh, do you know what? I know I got fired.
Tell us.
I think when I didn't really sort of get a lot of confidence until I think when I was just leaving university. And I'd sort of, when I went to university, I originally went to do medicine and I failed my medical exams. I didn't get in to do medicine. So I went through clearing and I did environmental science, and I didn't really enjoy the subject. So I spent most of my time running sort of clubs and promoting clubs. And then I was just always really inquisitive. So my first 3 jobs in advertising had me at a desk. And I was just like, my first 2 was in media buying and planning. And I just wanted to find out what was happening in the agency. So they'd be like going, "Where's Roger? I don't know. He's around somewhere."
You'd be on
So
wandering off somewhere.
I'd be wondering, I would have been better working as well in the creative department. So
Hmm.
there was obviously, it was a big sign. It was a sign that I wasn't used to that sort of environment. And I should have been doing something more creative, which is, luckily what I went on to do. But I was a terrible employee. Literally, I never got past the probation period, and I sort of came to the conclusion that, well, um, if I don't employ myself, no one else is going to. So yeah, it was
Do you know what? I hear that. Yeah, go on.
in retrospect, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I didn't know at
Yeah.
the time. I literally thought I was unemployable.
Yeah, and do you know what? I hear a lot of that from entrepreneurs. I think there's just that itch inside that you've just got to go out and do what you know you're good at. And in your case, it just came by chance because you were in your last job. I think you were saying you were selling the streetwear to your friend or sending the streetwear to your friend to sell it as market stall, and that's how it kind of flourished when you got back to the UK.
That's
Um,
right.
so do you think you did learn anything though, apart from just knowing that you needed to do your own thing?
I've learned, well, a few things. I learned that don't look at adversity in a negative perspective. That actually, from adversity, it's probably led to my greatest creations. So don't I don't assume when something adverse happens to me that it's really bad. I actually think it's an opportunity to reinvent myself. So I've got quite a positive outlook to that. You know, that wasn't clearly the case when I was 21 years of age. My first 3 jobs I got the sack with. I didn't realize that actually the universe was telling me something. But in retrospect, I think all of those things happened for the right reason. And then I just went on this journey of, starting my own business. And yeah, and I guess it wasn't easy, but it was what I was made to do, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think you found courage and determination through that experience because it's very easy to become quite despondent and not to really kind of know you want to do, not to be 100% sure, but I guess of course it's with the benefit of hindsight that you look back and you can be quite philosophical about it and just say, it was meant to be, and it opened the doors that I was meant to pursue. But there must have been an element of that positive thinking somewhere deep down, and that determination to just launch. And um, you talk a lot about being ego led, which I think is something that a lot of us can relate to, especially early on in our careers. And you've mentioned a few times that ego is not a good motivator, but it was for you at some point. It was a motivator, as it is for a lot of us. When did you have that moment of self-realization where you kind of shifted away from being driven by ego to being guided by something deeper? I think I like to think of it
Yeah,
as like a connection to a higher purpose. And how
yeah.
do you stay on track?
It's a lot of questions. I mean, firstly, what's important for the listeners to understand is I think there's three reasons to be in business, and I can only really think of three reasons. So I think there's a lot of people that are in business for their ego and they don't understand that's why they're in business. So examples of that if you say I want to be in business because I want to be in control of my own destiny, well, that's your ego, because what your ego is saying is I want to be in control. I can't work for somebody else. If you're saying, I want to be in business to make a difference, it's again ego. It's that you need the stature. So it's weird because people look at the word ego and they go, "Oh, I'm not in business because of my ego." But the reality is, I think a lot of people are in business for their ego, and they don't understand it. So in my case, I had come back from Malaysia and literally with my mum, who was a single mum, and we literally had nothing. We had the clothes on our back. We were living in South London. I was born in London, but I went to Malaysia when I was young, then came back to London. And when I came back, we literally had nothing. So there was a real determination to succeed in life. And, I wouldn't say I was the greatest student. I actually look back on my studying days with regret because I think I could have been a lot better student if I really focused on it. But in the end, I was determined to succeed in life. And I think I wanted to be able to say, look at me, I'm actually quite good at something. And that's what really drove me in my first business. So, for some people, that might be strong words, but I recognize that I was very ego driven in my first business, as a lot of famous entrepreneurs are, as Steve Jobs was very ego driven. He was adopted from a young age. Elon Musk was bullied at school and had quite a difficult upbringing in South Africa. Richard Branson was maybe not the richest kid at Stowe School, had a criminal record at an early age. Alan Sugar is not exactly the tallest person in the room. So, whether they recognize it or not, I think a lot of that, I can see my traits, similar traits in them, that their ego has driven them on to succeed. Okay. And they needed to prove something. So I think you've got to recognize that in yourself as an entrepreneur. You've got to, first of all, sit down as an entrepreneur and go, why am I in business? What is my motivating factor? What is my why? As Simon Sinek would say. And really examine it carefully. There really is the cult of the entrepreneur now. When I was starting my first business in the late 80s, there wasn't a cult of the entrepreneur. There was probably the beginning of Richard Branson
Yeah.
and what he was doing, but it really wasn't. Famous entrepreneurs now. Now you can't go anywhere without seeing famous entrepreneurs, and it's been a cult of an entrepreneur. So what makes me nervous is a lot of young people nowadays, I feel, want to go into entrepreneurship as a status symbol, which is your ego.
Yeah.
And all I'm really saying there is understand your why. So if that is one reason to be in business, I think there's only two other reasons to be in business. So the next reason to be in business is to make money. And what I want is a lot more entrepreneurs to stop giving us answers that they think we want to hear as an investor. Oh, I'm in business because I want to make a better world. And I've said that, okay? Or, and actually just to say to me, I'm in business to make money. I love that. I love it when you get entrepreneurs saying, I'm in business to make money, because for me as an investor, that's why I'm investing in your business. Yes, I've chosen to invest in impact consumer brands that will make a better world, and that's a conscious choice that I've made. But I also want to make sure that the entrepreneurs that I invest in are aligned with our own financial goals, that we want to have an exit. So I want entrepreneurs to say to me, I'm in business to make money. And I think the third reason to be in business, and I can think of no other reasons, by the way, it's only ego, make money, and the final reason is to be in business to hand it over to your family or your employees or to a charitable trust, as in the case of Yves Chonard from Patagonia, who handed it over to, I don't know what, Amazon or something like that, to hand it over to create a better world. Okay. And that's a great reason. But as an investor, I'm really focused on the one that says to me that I'm in business to make money. And I think that people have got a sort of love-hate relationship with the word I'm in business to make money or money.
Mm,
But there's nothing wrong with making money. It's how you make your money that defines you. Clearly, if you're making your money in defense, and as a result of investing in defense, innocent lives are being lost, I wouldn't do that. And I
yeah.
don't think that's an acceptable way to make money.
Mm,
Clearly, if you're making money from gambling, again, I don't think that's an acceptable way to make money. So it is make money in a good way, but it's not making your money that's wrong. It's what you do with that money. And what I've realized after, I guess, having a major exit is now I really want to define the rest of my 20 years on this planet and say, okay, I spent 30 or 40 years really working hard, but now I want to leave this world a little bit better than I found it. I want to invest in the things that really matter to me. And the things that really matter to me is I love working with entrepreneurs, young or old. And because if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I think as Peter Crouch once famously said, I'd probably be a virgin. So, it gave me my self-belief. So
yeah.
I'd love to be able to pass that on to a younger generation or new entrepreneurs. But at the same time, what's the point of creating businesses if we don't have a beautiful planet to live on? And so I want to create the next generation of impact consumer brands that will make a better world. And by that, it is, do I want to rid the world of plastic chewing gum? Yes, I do. I think plastic chewing gum is terrible. It's a major
Absolutely.
health hazard. It clogs in your brain, leads to potentially to dementia and strokes, and it clogs in your heart. I think latest data was that you get a teaspoon of plastic in your brain, and the only type of plastic I know that you eat is plastic gum. So, and never mind the environmental damage that it does in terms of it never biodegrades, it's littering all our floors. It's a disgusting thing. So what we should be doing is chewing plants, not plastic. That's why I've
Absolutely.
invested in a plant-based gum company. And I'm loving that experience because not only do I believe that business will make money, and I'm unashamed that it's going to be making money, but we're going to make money in the right way, and we're going to create a better world of that. And if I can get rid of plastic gum in the UK, that's enough for me to go, that's something I've done to leave this city, London, a better city than I found it, which is one of my aims. I just want to leave this world a little bit better than I found it.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I think, you know what? Ego's not such a bad thing. Sometimes if that is what is giving you the drive and the motivation to embark on a path and stay determined and steadfast, and it's part of your journey, is obviously proven useful. And it's just being able to recognize it, because ultimately it gets to a point in your life where that can't be the sole driving force behind what you do. It gets to a point in your maturity where you start to think about a higher purpose. If you've been successful, etc., you've got nothing to prove. You don't
Yeah,
need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to prove anything to yourself. You've done that. You've become successful. And the next step is, okay, I've become successful. I've made my profit, which frankly, if you're not making profit, you shouldn't be doing it, because it's not philanthropy. So the third step is, okay, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? And what you've just described is profit with purpose, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, hopefully. When you started BoxFresh, you had obviously a clear vision, or later on a clear vision, courage and support from your family. You've advised startups to be resourceful and tap into things like government grants. I think it's really sort of savvy thinking, because the first thing they do is just go to a bank and take out loans at crazy interest rates. What would you say the key role has been in mentoring for you that you've played?
yeah. I mean, it's different because when you're talking about mentoring, I'm investing in small businesses, early stage businesses, and as a result of that, I work very closely with the CEOs of that business.
Mm,
So I think a major point of difference for us in terms of the way we run our venture capital fund compared to other venture capital funds is, firstly, we're a firm of entrepreneurs. So our expertise is operational. So most venture capital funds don't join the boards of any companies that they invest in. They say they're going to, or they say they're going to give advice, but the reality is they don't really. The nature of the game is, if you've got a small fund, let's say £10 million, and your average ticket size is a 500,000, you've got 20 investments to make in 2 or 3 years' time. You've got a relatively small team. You don't have enough time to join the boards of 20 companies.
mm,
So you're just left to your own devices. So we've rejected that model. And what we're doing is we're only doing up to 4 deals a year, one a quarter, and we're joining the boards of the companies that we invest in, either myself or an advisor that we will find them. And as a result of that, we passionately believe in helping out and mentoring entrepreneurs. So what we say is, if you took like 100% of entrepreneurs that we would look at, we would say 25% of them would do well no matter what I say or we do, because they're probably proven entrepreneurs. It's not their first rodeo. They've done it before, and or they're smart and they're going to succeed. So with little help from me or any other VC firm. But it's going to be 25% that are going to fail no matter what I say, because they're just not going to listen.
yeah.
And God knows I've had those. So I've had investments in businesses where within 6 months they've gone bust because, frankly, the founders never listened, or they weren't committed enough. But we're really focused on advising and mentoring the 50% that could succeed with guidance. Because from my experience, I would say that the majority of first time entrepreneurs do not have the skill set to succeed. Okay. They think they do.
Mm,
They think that they know everything, but they don't. Because all it's going to take is one major mistake and that business is over. So what a mentor does, or what a non-executive director does, which is what I'm mainly, or a chairman does, is say to the entrepreneur, look, I've tried this. You need to do this, because If you don't do that, this will happen. So for those young entrepreneurs out there, and God knows there's loads of them that think, they see the YouTube videos, they listen to all the podcasts, and they think that they're an absolute know-it-all. You've got a rude awakening to come. Because because I was you, I was that person.
Mm.
Because the lesson that I would give to young entrepreneurs now is my greatest mistake was not having enough humility and not listening enough. Because it doesn't cost anything to ask for help. It doesn't cost anything to listen, and it doesn't cost a lot to bring on board a advisor to your business that could potentially be the difference between succeeding or failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your strategy is really clear. Fewer, more intentional investments and really adding value, because they can come to you with a really innovative idea that's aligned with your ethos and the numbers work. But what you're actually able to do is bring the benefit of your experience to be able to see long into the distance and far out wide to spot where the pitfalls might be and share that with them. Hopefully they do listen to you.
Uh, and it's what I enjoy.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy that bit. That's the bit that I feel I can really add value. And I would say to any entrepreneur out there who's maybe considering of setting up an impact consumer brand, if all you're interested in is money, don't come to me.
Mm.
If you're interested in really growing your business and really being challenged, then come to me, because I think that we will give advice based on a 35-year career in consumer brands and an extensive network in that field.
You've said that the best way to learn business is to do business, or by doing business rather. How much of what you've learned has been formalized into like frameworks, processes, or plans that you've used to launch and scale future ventures, or that you bring to the table in
Mm.
terms of the positions that you take? Or are you quite sort of casual, hands off in terms of anything formal, and it's more just like the advisory element?
It's a really good question, and I don't want the listeners or viewers out there to think that I've just done it off the hoof, my whole career. I went to London Business School when I was young. I did an entrepreneur program at London Business School. I've recently gone back to London Business School. I think the first thing to say is knowledge always helps you.
Mm.
But to be frank with you, 90% of my knowledge I've learned on the job, and it's been common sense. I think if I was to say what one of my strengths would be, I think one of my strengths is that I've got really strong emotional intelligence.
Mm.
Maybe I should have been born a woman or something, but I really trust it. And how that came about and what I mean by that is the following: is when I was running BoxFresh as creative director and founder of the business, I would create maybe 1,000 products a year. And there was no computer says, do this, do that. It was, I like this t-shirt, it fits good, that's the right color, let's run with it, or
Mm.
that's the right design. And I just had to just trust my intuition. And I think that has really put me in great stead in terms of running a VC firm, because when you get people buying consumer brands, yes, you might do price checking, okay, but the decision to buy something is often an emotional led decision.
Yeah.
I've gone into Selfridges or I've gone into Primark, wherever you're shopping. I've liked that product. I like the touch and feel. I like the price. I like how it makes me feel. I'm buying that. And I don't think we talk enough about that in business. I don't think we have enough women in leadership, because it's largely the system is fixed against them, and we don't address the fundamental issues of what creates the inequality which exists. You know, some people like to call it wokeism. I like to call it inequality, and the reality is we can either exist in a male dominated world or a male dominated Anglo-Saxon Christian world, or we can go, no, we're going to try and create a more balanced approach. That it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter your sex, it doesn't matter your religious inclination, it doesn't matter your neurodiversity. All that matters is your strength of character, and you should be weighed up against that. That's really the main issues. I don't know where I'm going with this. Got
No,
lost
I
thread
hear
there.
you. And
But
you know
anyway,
what? It's
you
really
get the point.
interesting, Roger, because the two of the people I've interviewed so far have echoed very similar sentiments. Like one of them, the first person I interviewed, Ziad, said to me, because I said to him, look, the key message from your perspective, and he said, existing in bubbles is the worst thing that you could do if you
Totally.
care about sustainability. And I think it's not just about, gender or race or religion. It's just even about not necessarily having the same opinions as someone. I think we need to be able to have open, respectful conversations and dialogue. Because
Mm,
even if we're on polar opposites of sides of the spectrum, I think it's important for us as human beings to be able to have that kind of respectful conversation.
mm,
And it might be an opportunity for someone to change their mind about something. And then the other thing is, it's when you do that, you're able to actually then treat people individually, and I think that's really important because
mm,
another takeaway that I got from Catherine from Olives and Heather was
mm,
the importance of being able to see people, not look for clones, and kind
mm.
of detach yourself from their own
Definitely.
needs. Because if you understand what they're good at, and you understand where perhaps they're not so good at certain things, we're not perfect as human beings, you're
Mm,
able to make that connection and you're able to accommodate their needs, and hopefully you're able to get the best out of them.
mm. Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
I
I
mean
hear what you're
it, it,
saying.
it it's weird because look, I'll talk on a difficult subject, and I'm happy to talk about it. But let's just give one example of inequality, okay? It's an example that's relevant to yourself. Let's talk about women in leadership, okay? Right? And let's try for some people to make them realize why that inequality exists. And you can choose, you can go through all the other inequalities we can go through, but let's just choose this one as an example. And in this example, the reality is when you look at the top 50 CEOs in Europe, I think, if I'm correct, if not all of them, certainly the vast majority were men. Okay. All
Mm,
right. And let's just say they're white Christian men, but it doesn't matter.
mm,
Let's just say they're men. We're dealing with the
yeah.
men versus female. And then, you get some people, your sort of Trumps of this world, that just go, well, it's survival of the fittest. They're the best people for the job. Okay. But it's not survival of the fittest. The system is geared against women in leadership. Why? Because so many women have to make a decision a certain period in their career of, do I want to have a family, or do I want to have a career? And so many women face this decision, and they don't have a middle road that they can go down. It's often literally, I can either have my career or I can have my family.
True.
There isn't a middle road. So let's give you an example of a middle road, because it was a business that I went to invest in, and unfortunately it failed. It was a business called Rollshare, okay, which was trying to exactly deal with this, trying to deal with a situation that women in leadership didn't have to make that choice.
Mm,
What they could do is role share, job share, right? So they could raise a family and still have their career. There was a middle way. So they both, rather than one woman doing a job, it was two women did a job 3 days a week, and they had one day they're in the office together and they cross over, and actually all the
Handover.
figures
Yeah.
handover, all the figures showed that their performance was off the Richter scale,
Yeah.
that they outperformed people that are doing the job by themselves, never mind outperforming men. Okay.
Mm.
But this is an example of the inequality that exists within our system. And these are the things that we need to address. It isn't about being woke, it's about understanding inequalities, why they exist, and breaking down the barriers of inequality. And you can divide that by, all the inequalities that you've got,
Mm.
it doesn't matter. It's not just about, you know, sexism in the workplace. It's also about racial issues. It's about gender and neurodiversity issues. There's
Yes.
so many issues, that we need to look at. And ultimately, I don't want to get my too much of a high horse in this. I was and it's ultimately, let's just get to one place, which is this: let's treat people how we expect to be treated,
Yeah.
irrespective of color, irrespective of their sex, irrespective of their religious inclination,
Mm.
irrespective of their neurodiversity,
Yeah.
irrespective of their sexuality. Just doesn't matter.
Just be
Just see
kind.
beyond that. Yeah,
Yeah. Just be kind. You'll feel
just
better
be
as a human
normal.
being.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
treat
No, I hear
people.
you. And
Yeah,
and you
that's
know what? If you can't see it that way, think of it this way. Calling it wokeism is actually really naive because you've got a percentage of the population, significant percentage of the population who are effectively unemployed, but they've got an awful lot of skill and an awful lot of knowledge to bring to the table, and they can be a very productive source of labor for your business and for our economy,
well,
and you're missing out on that
totally.
opportunity.
Yeah,
But yeah, I could talk
totally.
about that for ages. I
Yeah,
want to talk about sustainability because it's actually a passion of ours that we share, and
yeah.
I want to unpack how you approach it. The BoxFund model evaluates products, marketing, and messaging through an ESG lens. It makes sense that each investment proposition is assessed on a case-by-case basis, but with the sustainability landscape being so dynamic, how do you balance that flexibility with the need to have a standardized baseline that you work with, like a framework or a metric to score, monitor, and hold brands accountable for their impact? Nude gums. Have I said it right, by the way? Nude?
Yeah, new gum.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
that feels like an obvious fit. Like you look at that and everything about it makes sense. Like, of course, we don't want to chew plastic. Of course, can feel good. It's a habit and it's a nice thing to do. And you want to be able to chew natural ingredients. But for anything that's a little bit less clear cut, how do you kind of deal with that?
There's two or three points that you've raised there, which I'll try and tackle individually. Firstly, we reject the term ESG now, so we prefer not
Good.
to use it.
Yeah.
We use the term impact, and the reason why is we feel that term has been watered down by the corporate world to the point of meaningless. So you can get somebody like Exxon claiming to have high ESG values because they plant 1 million trees apparently in China, whilst also polluting our oceans through some oil spill. So, you know, we don't we reject it completely. So we won't use that term. So we just talk about impact brands. That's the first thing that we talk about. The second thing is we don't use metrics.
Okay.
We've got a healthy dislike and a healthy skepticism when it comes to any business plans, not business plan, any spreadsheets that are put in front of us in terms of early growth businesses. We don't run our investments on numbers. The first three things that we do go back to what I said before. We've got some core principles of making an investment in consumer brands, which are qualitative judgments, not metric based judgments. And those are the three core pillars of any consumer brand, and I challenge anyone that's ever worked in consumer brands to say there's more or less or none of these are right, and they are, in my belief, the following, and it's not hard. It's firstly, product is king. If you don't have product that's special to your customer, you won't exist. So anyone that's coming to us, the first thing we'll do is we'll look at the product. What problem is it resolving? How is it resolving it? Why is it going to be successful with that product? Why does it make people feel special? Which again goes back to behavioral science and Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, the need to feel special. Okay. Again, feeds in with ego. All right. So I've been in the business of selling ego my
Yeah.
whole life. That's what selling consumer brands are. It's ego.
Mm.
It's ultimately, why does somebody buy a brand? Because they need the ego saying, I bought that brand. Why does somebody not just buy, a mini a mini car or a clapped out or mini electric car, as opposed to buying a brand new Porsche electric car? It's the ego. You want the
Yeah.
ego, go, oh, I drive a Porsche or whatever. So firstly, the first metric we look at is product. The second metric we look at is you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't create traffic to that product, if you don't create customers to that product, you won't exist. So we're really obsessive with traffic. How are you going to acquire customers? What's your customer acquisition strategy? And then the final metric that we'll look at is you can have the best product in the world, you can create traffic to that product, but you've got to have a great team to turn that into profitable sales, to convert that into profitable sales. So our three metrics are not three quantitative metrics. We won't even look at the P&L, or anything. We will look at those three metrics first, because we're pretty certain we can get the P&L right if we've got those three things correct. Because all the P&L is doing is reporting the performance of those three metrics. So we're much more focused on the cause rather than report. So our metrics are product, customer acquisition strategy, and then team. And then obviously we'll look at the financials, but it'd be more around, right, what are the valuations? Are they justifiable? What's the growth projections like? Are they realistic? That's when we start to look into that. But we wouldn't look at any projections until you dealt with those first three. And sometimes you don't need to be great at all three. Sometimes you're really good at just one of those, and we might invest.
Mm.
So I think in the case of Nude, we believed in the product proposition of ridding the world of plastic gum. Had the beginning of a traffic strategy because it was in Waitrose, and we felt that was a key retailer to get plastic gum banned. And in terms of team, there was a good CEO, but there's nothing else with the team. There was a founder, and that was it, basically.
Yeah.
So we really went with the product. Other times, guys have come to us and we know they've got great traffic, and they've had, so you might get an influencer. We've had an influencer, he's on Boxy, let's say Sunna from Tonic Health. He's got great traffic. I think he'd be the first to admit that his product isn't world beating. He's got good product
Yeah.
under Tonic Health, but what he does have is traffic. So he doesn't need world beating product. He needs good product with his authenticity and match that to the traffic he already creates, and he'll be successful. And he happens to be a very driven individual, and then sometimes you get certain entrepreneurs, like I just recently interviewed the founder of Mouse, which does all the protective cases, and He had great product. He's creating great traffic, and he's got a great team. And I'm like, wow, he's got the whole lot. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they're it's not metrics for me. They're the three core pillars I believe
Mm.
in when it comes to investing in consumer brands.
Makes sense. I want to talk a little bit about the cultural shift towards, I was going to say ESG consumerism, but I'll say impact or sustainable consumerism.
Yeah.
Something that obviously BoxFund champions. And I love the point that you made. I listened to one of your interviews when you said the sensory in-person shopping experience is going to encourage more mindful consumption versus what I think is like kind of that dopamine driven click frenzy online buy-in.
Yeah.
I'm a massive thrifter, by the way. Like, I love thrifting. It's just like literally what I do in my spare
That's
time.
what my kids love.
I think
My
it's the
son
next big
never.
thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
he
it's such
doesn't
a
get
shame.
something individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, like they say, one
my son
man's,
loves it.
yeah, it's so, honestly, I just think it's such a shame. Like down by Tower Bridge, like years and years ago, they had all those antique markets with all the secondhand furniture shops. I mean, it's making a little bit of a comeback now. Thankfully, the whole COVID thing's over. Um, I guess my question to you is, how do we think we can scale that intentionally? Um, and I know it goes back to me just realizing that not everybody's got that frame of mind, but if governments are not going to be the primary drivers here,
Mm,
how do we educate consumers and investors to demand
mm,
sustainability values or impact values by default, not just like as a niche preference? And how do we turn it into a global movement, especially when
yeah.
political swings and corporate greenwashing threaten progress?
Mm. Lots of questions. Let me just not. So I'll try and deal
Yeah.
with that. I mean, the simple answer to that is it's the answer to that is money. Okay. And you've got to prove that that is going to be financially successful. So I think the first thing we need to say is we're not looking for a begging bowl. We're not looking for that people have to look at sustainability and buying into sustainability as a sacrifice, but that act or invest in sustainability and they're going to give up their returns. We need to prove to people that you can make a better world and make money.
Mm.
So that's the first thing I really need to say, and I really need to stress to investors. I believe the future of all consumer brands will be impact brands. Why do I believe that? Okay, let's take the example of chewing gum again. Okay, or we could take drink. Let's take the example of Coca-Cola. Okay, Coca-Cola is one of the biggest brands in the world. It's worth billions and billions of pounds. Do I believe that Coca-Cola will exist in its current guise in 10 years' time? No,
I
I
hope
don't.
not. I boycotted them already.
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you why. Okay. And do I believe there's going to be a movement towards more health conscious drinks in that period? Yes, I do. So what we saw this week, we saw Pepsi or PepsiCo buy Poppy, which was a gut-based drink, I think at a 1 or 2 billion valuation. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't exactly remember the number. And that's a major statement. You've got a major carbonated sugar drink company, PepsiCo, that made its fortune on Pepsi buying into health drinks. Okay. All right. That's a major sign of the movement towards health drink. And at the same time, what you're going to have is more information about drinks that are bad for you to drink. So let's say, so in 5 years' time, quantum computing is going to be taking over all computing. We're talking about computing power at a million times greater level than where we're currently at, minimum. As a result of that, we're currently able to understand what we drink and the effect on our body from a molecular level, okay? But we're going to understand things from an atomic level,
Wow.
a completely different order of magnitude. And as a result of that, they're going to make the direct relationship with quantum computing power between foods that are bad for you and food that leads to diseases or cancer causing XYZ. And I believe that you're going to have a lot of foods that we currently have that we just simply will not be having going
Yeah.
forward. Let's take the example of plastic gum.
Yeah.
There's research that's just come out last week from Queen's University in Belfast saying that chewing gum leads to microplastics being absorbed in your blood, and that microplastics, you could get up to a teaspoon's worth of microplastic in your brain. Yeah. And those microplastics lead to a 4 times greater chance of you having dementia, or a greater chance of having clogged strokes because they're clogging up your arteries. Okay. And we're chewing plastic gum. What are we, crazy? This sort of realization, and with the spread of social media, people are going to start to reject a lot of the traditional foods that they've had before. And how we're going to have change is the consumer is going to demand change. That's what's going to happen. So another example of that was this week, um, Marks and Spencer's launched the ingredients on the front of their packets. Okay. Right. So they had cornflakes and it just said one ingredient, corn, and it flew off the shelves. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, it wasn't their idea. RX Bar did it years before, but hats off to Marks and Spencer for doing it. Wonderful. You're really on trend. Well, the customers immediately bought that whole, all all of the stock out. That shows that customers want to have transparency. Okay. So I believe there's going to be a long-term consumerism trend towards sustainable and impact brands. Let's take the area of fashion. Okay. So there's a wonderful documentary out and it's called Buy Now. It's on Netflix. I really recommend everyone to watch it. And what we don't do as a consumer is we never talk about the end of life of a product. We buy something and we throw it away and we don't even think about the effect that that's having on our world. And now we're getting mountains of clothes in Africa or wherever the clothes get dumped. They're literally dumped. They're
Yeah.
not recycled, they're dumped.
Yeah.
Okay. And this can't keep going on. So, what I believe, and many other environmentalists believe, is we're going to have a much more conscious consumer who's going to start to demand and think about the end of life of your product. If I chew plastic gum, what happens to the plastic gum? Well, it doesn't go away, by the way. It never biodegrades. No, I'm not going to chew plastic gum. I'm going to chew plant-based gum, which biodegrades like a banana skin would biodegrade, and I prefer to buy that. I'm going to buy Patagonia because they promise to repair any garment or replace it that Patagonia produced. So as a result of that, they have much more hard-wearing products.
Yeah.
And I believe this is going to be a cultural shift in consumerism that you will not be able to stop. You're going to have a younger generation who are going to want to know what happens to our product at the end of it. And as a result of that, those companies that are dealing with thinking about end of life or thinking about potential damage are going to become more profitable. And Patagonia is an exact example of that.
It couldn't happen sooner enough for me. And actually, speaking of that, I wanted to give you the final question if you've got a couple of minutes
Go on.
to talk about exit strategy. So you talk about the importance of leading with purpose, and I'd love to explore how that shapes your exit strategy. Take a brand, I'm not going to name them, but they started as a sustainable, value-driven company founded by indie creators, but then they sold out to a corporation that's facing ethical criticisms. For founders, selling can mean life-changing financial freedom, but it's also risks diluting or even betraying the original mission. When you sold your businesses, how intentional were you about vetting buyers to ensure alignment with your mission? Did you build safeguards to protect the purpose long term? And
Mm.
what would your advice be to founders navigating the tension between profit and principles? Again, I'm sorry, I pack a lot of
Wow.
questions in, but I
Yeah.
think
I,
I wanted to
I,
end on that.
yeah. And you know what? It's a very thought-provoking question. So, I mean, I have to unpack that question a bit because it's not a simple answer, and I can only speak from my own life lessons. And the first thing I would say to any entrepreneur out there is, you would never go on a journey without understanding your destination. So before you start your entrepreneurial journey, be really clear about your destination, your why am I in business? Am I in business just for my ego, which is, you know what, I want to run my own business and that's it. I'm not interested in getting other investors in, whatever. I'm just doing it for myself. Great. That's fine. Go do that. Okay. Or am I in business? I want to build this business. I want to sell it. Great. You might want to talk to some VCs and maybe some private equity. Or am I in business to hand it on to my employees or to my family, or for the betterment of the world? Okay. So firstly, really understand your reason why you're in business and choose your reason. So understand your destination. Because I would say that the majority of entrepreneurs do not have a clear understanding of their destination. Okay. And as a result of that, they're going to be uninvestable, I believe, because we want to make sure we're aligned. In the case of a VC, of course, we want to be backing a business who hopes to then sell it on to somebody else, and then we can get an exit and go from there. But that doesn't mean that's the only alternative, and I'm not saying that is. So understand your reason that you're in business. So let's say you've now said, I'm in business to sell the business. Okay. I mean, the first thing is, you know, all that glitters is not gold. Be really careful of private equity, because let's take the example of Man United. The Glazers bought Man United and loaded it up with debt. It's probably the worst thing they could have ever done. God knows why the original founders or the board did not do that themselves in the first place. I don't know why they needed a private equity. So be really careful. Private equity also creates some problems. You've got a lot of the problems with private equity is in the fine print. It's not about the headline number. A lot of the problems come in the fine print of private equity. So, be careful when you're dealing with that. And you are right. You've got to be really mindful of the impact on the people you're leaving behind in those organizations. In the case of BoxPark, I gave 10% of my equity away to my staff, but only but that equity is then in the hands. It is in theory owned by the staff, but only if that aligns with the private equity.
Mm,
So you are so right. You've got to. if you really care about your company, you care about your staff, you care about your legacy, you've got to be really careful about the person that you sell that company to, whether it's private equity, whether it's a trade buyer, or sometimes actually it could be your own staff, which I'm a great advocate for as well. You can almost manufacture your own private equity deal and own buyout from within your own team.
Yeah, I
So
agree. And I
it,
think
it's
even from your
it's
own family, but I think technology is going to help with that massively. I think blockchain security tokenization is going to open up doors for that potentially.
if they allow it to happen, you
Yeah,
know,
well, that's a different debate.
because you take away control,
Yeah,
because there's a lot of powerful
democratization, they don't
forces
want it.
out there.
Yeah.
No, they want the almighty dollar. They want oil to be sold in dollar. They want gold to be sold in dollar because it
Mm,
effectively pegs the value of the dollar.
yeah.
So, to suddenly move to blockchain, I'm not sure it's going to happen. It obviously makes a lot of sense, but you remove the ability to manipulate. And unfortunately, we live in a society now where it seems to be all about manipulation.
Yeah, that's going to be a different fight, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah,
Um, we've gone over, and I'm so glad that we did this. Thank you so much again.
you're very
Um,
welcome.
I'm really enjoying your podcast, and yeah, I hope we do a follow-up. There's so many topics that we could talk about. Thank you so much, Roger.
You're welcome. And thank you for inviting me on and listening.